and she was, you know, this kind of space being, all blue. And it just kind of dropped in for me. And I'm like, of course, like all that these yogis and Taoists are doing are really like kind of dissolving this kind of 3D reality and starting to interact in these kind of astral domains and astral spaces and beyond. What I've found to be the truest expression so far that I've been able to kind of piece together, and I've been practicing since I was 15 and studying yoga diligently since I was probably 20. Before that, I think I was very fortunate. My first teacher was an old man. He would have been in his 70s, might have been older. And he asked us to cultivate our chi at our sort of navel area. We created this big orange chi ball, and I was 15. So I was like, of course I can create a big orange chi ball. You know, it didn't even occur to me that would be a strange thing to do. And then I would, you know, it was to use that energy and to kind of like move it through my body and see where I needed healing and kind of, and then hold that energy in my hands and like feel this power that, you know, and it was just this really obvious and profound and easy experience for me. And I thought, oh, yoga. Anyway, then I started going to classes and we were doing all this stuff. And I was like, nobody's talked about energy once. Nobody's talked about chi balls or, you know, any of this stuff. They're just talking about these other things. And I kind of got I was like, okay, well, maybe that's just something that, you know, happened and kind of got back over here in my peripherals. And I kept practicing these kind of vigorous styles of, I was doing Ashtanga Vinyasa. So it's very disciplined. There's a lot of, you know, 6 days a week, hour, 2 hours a day, go, like very early in the morning, very little in the way of kind of discourse around the practice, which I liked. So there was no talking and there's no, you know, there's one mantra at the beginning, but it's very much kind of a non-event in terms of any religiosity. There's no bhakti, nothing like that. So for me, it was very practical, it was very easy, you know, disciplined, very hard, but it was, you know, an easy thing to sort of fit in. And I was very committed to that. And then I started going to like more public classes where people talked, and I was like, all this stuff people were saying. And I was like, wow, like it's kind of like self-help, but it's a little bit like religion and it's a little bit of, you know, and I found yoga very confusing. And I would have been in my late 20s when I went to my first real lead classes. So I didn't really experience any of the stuff that you probably are talking about when you do, you know, talk about this kind of synthetic yoga. And I definitely see it in this area where there's a lot of either quite just generic corporate kind of American yoga, which is this kind of exercise class kind of style of yoga with like the kind of self-help personal development slant. That's pretty popular. Mm-hmm. And then I see a lot of the more kind of, you know, like esoteric, like Kundalini yoga and those kinds of things. So I guess where I fit is more in this sense of my experience with my own practice has been, it's just about peeling away the layers. And there's a guy called Patanjali who wrote a book called the Yoga Sutras, which does not mention chakras once. And his book is very much about psychology. It's very much a piece on how we get distracted by cravings and, you know, we have all these aversions to things and that we push things away or we bring them forward. And this creates, you know, dissatisfaction, and we end up kind of striving for all these things to make us happy that are outside of ourselves, and we kind of end up miserable. And this is not the way. And the way is to turn it back and look at ourselves and actually start to examine, how do I live? You know, what are my values? How do I move my body? How do I breathe? You know, what am I able to focus my attention on? How do I cultivate that attention? How do I turn that attention inward? And then how do I sort of maintain this space of open awareness? And that's really a summary of like, you know, the yamas, niyamas, asana, pranayama, you know, dharana, all the way up to samadhi. And this idea of, you know, samadhi, I think is misunderstood. People talk about it a lot. And there's different stages of samadhi. So I think of it more as like awareness of the ability to sort of perceive without, you know, mistruth kind of clouding your vision. So, you know, if you're looking at the current mainstream news narrative, you're not in samadhi because you're seeing, you know, craving and aversion kind of at the nth degree. And you're seeing humanity playing out Maya, the illusory kind of dance of life that is not in service really to any of us. It's kind of this, I mean, it's a necessary game, and I don't I'm personally not one that wants to transcend the game. I think the game is a part of it, but you need to see it for what it is. You know, you need to be aware that it's not real, and if you're participating in it, you're participating in it with that awareness that this is not actually, you know, it's like acting in a play. I'm not really this character, but I'm going to give it my all for the time that I'm in this play, right?
Exactly.
And yes,
exactly.
That's
managing the time we engage, and, you know, to what degree we engage, and to what, you know, for how long we engage. And there's a lot of people that are walking around going, oh, I'm totally sovereign and I'm 100% clear. And it's like, wow, you know, the degree of self-delusion that's going on in people in the spiritual communities who say that. And
I mean, look, it's just rampant. And I think I think yoga, you know, the way yoga has been taught and interpreted has a lot to answer for, because it does say, oh, you can achieve this state of enlightenment, you know, da, 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 da. And, you know, even Buddha, he just kept on living, and he kept on making mistakes, and he kept on doing dumb shit, and he wasn't enlightened. He just had awareness of his dumb shit, you know, like he was. And I find people miss that all the time. I'm like, Buddha still died in a physical form. He still suffered. He still went through all of the things you go through. He just knew he was doing it. You know, he was completely aware of the fact that it was happening to him. And it's not about how much you meditate or how much you navel gaze or any of this stuff. And that stuff to me is like just classic bullshit. It's like you're just putting your projection of like what's ethically and morally superior onto everybody else because you're a yoga teacher. Like that happens all the time as well.
It does, yeah.
You know, and I just think, no, who you're learning from is very important, because, and this is in the yogic traditions, it's like the guru is as important as the student, because, you know, if you're learning from some fool, you're going to learn from a fool and you're going to become a fool, you know. So I don't have many teachers, and I'm very fussy about who I study with. And I would only say like Paul Grilly, who's my yin teacher and my primary teacher, is the only person I'm yet to find fault with. Like, as in, I feel like he embodies for me the integrity. He was the first person I ever met in yoga or anywhere who I thought was a yogi, like, you know, and I was like, oh, like that's it. And he's got great boundaries. He's got excellent communication style. He's got a long-term relationship with a woman who he has ultimate reverence for, but isn't like, he doesn't worship her. He doesn't, you know, he just flat out respects her. They're able to participate in each other's lives, but also have their own thing going on. You know, they can talk about each other's faults without being jerks about it. You know, like there's just this real integrity with them that I haven't seen anywhere else. And I just found, you know, being in his presence, I mean, I just find myself constantly moved into this, you know, purest space of, and, you know, he's not easy on me. He's not, you know, he's not a pussycat. Like he's not someone that just sort of, you know, tells you what you want to hear. But I just have so much respect and reverence for him as a person. And you know, he's taught me so much about yoga that I just didn't expect to learn from someone who I thought was just a yin yoga teacher, you know. And I think, and he's really interested in how we, you know, how we evolve. Like he's interested in human evolution, and he speaks a lot to these. His teacher was Japanese, which I think might have a lot to do with his groundedness. His teacher was a Japanese priest of the Shinto Buddhist tradition, and he was an animist. So he spoke to the wind and he spoke to the trees, and his work was very much around the health of the community that he lived in. So he did all of the entity clearing and all of the healing of the waters, and all of the, you know, he had to fix wells that had, and, you know, the water spirit had been chased away or whatever, you know, his things like that was his practice in his jam. And he taught, he was a yogi as well, in that he taught yogic principles.